I first want to begin talking to you about the Parliament session because a lot of stakeholders in Indian economy are looking at this session with much hope and with much despair. Let me first talk to you about the session that just ended. The monsoon session was a washout, and you know, we can blame both the government and the opposition for that. But if I were to ask you, stakeholders of the Indian economy would want to know, what is the Congress's stance going to be in the winter session of Parliament? Because your stance will perhaps determine the course of a lot of economic decisions, and which is why I want to ask you, particularly in the light of the fact that Mr. Jaitley has had a few meetings with some of your senior leaders, of course on the pretext of giving his daughter's wedding card, but he did have a meeting with Rahul Gandhi himself, and we're given to understand that the winter session of Parliament was indeed discussed. So what will be the Congress's stance on in the winter session of Parliament?
As the stance of the opposition should be to raise issues which are of national concern. And also there have been developments in the intersession period which do warrant attention and discussion both. We should be very clear when you are referring to the stakeholders' despair. Why should there be any despair? And despair is not then something which is new. That should have been there for the last 7-8 years. When the BJP was in opposition and they didn't allow the parliament to function, they didn't allow the parliament to take up the legislative business, they derailed the legislative agenda of the then government. Now, in the last 1 year, they were fortunate to have an opposition which was not having a partisan agenda. And as a result, more business was transacted in the first 3 sessions. That's how you had the land boundary agreement with Bangladesh, the constitutional amendment. You had the insurance bill, which BJP blocked for 7 years, which was passed. Let's look at the positives. Now, if last session was a washout, the responsibility or the blame of that squarely lies with the Prime Minister and his government. Because they did not heed to the urging of the combined opposition that the Prime Minister reassures the country with regard to the commitment of his government to uphold the constitutional rights of the citizens and also the secular fabric of the country. Why it was important? Because his ministers were making statements. Now nobody else could have spoken to us. Yes, the leader of the House in Rajya Sabha, Arun Jaitley, did speak, but
you would have wanted the Prime Minister to take the lead and break his silence.
Only Prime Minister can either take action against his ministers or reassure. But the Prime Minister remained obdurate.
There's a reason why I went back to the stakeholders in Indian economy phrase. And you're right, stakeholders of the Indian economy should have been worried even when the Parliament was being stalled in your tenure.
No, for 7 years.
I grant you that. The reason why I'm asking you this question today, sir, is that there is a very important legislation in the form of the GST that the country would want to see.
Yes, the country wanted to see it, in fact, about, again, 5 years ago.
So let me ask you this question.
GST was tabled by us.
Yes.
We are the authors of the GST.
That's right.
But let me be very clear here. One is the legislative agenda of the government of the day. Fine. We are the authors of the GST. We are in favor of GST. But we want a GST which genuinely creates a common market in India and brings down the transaction costs so that the burden both on the producer and the consumer is reduced. Now, we have certain reservations because of the compromise.
I want to speak to you about your reservations, and I'm going to come to
let me make one thing clear here. Parliament session is not only about the government's legislative agenda. It cannot be reduced to one bill. It's the Parliament of India. It's the highest forum of discussion and debate on all issues which are of national interest and concern, and that's what the opposition's duty is.
Because you represent the opposition on every economic issue that either faces the government or faces the country at large, I have a very blunt question to ask of you, and you rightly said you are the authors of the GST. Would you then not want to see this legislation go through?
Of course we would, but it cannot be rubber stamped. We have raised our reservations. These are on record. The select committee report is there. It's up to the government to respond to those reservations and concerns and meet our demands. Government has to revert to us. They cannot say that this is our bill. They have made big concessions and compromises in their desperation to pass the bill. First you block it for 5 years, then you become desperate, then you make concessions. This is not a partisan issue. We would like to make it clear. The concerns that we have flagged are neither political nor partisan. It's in the interest of the tax reform, It's in the interest of creating a common market. Now, we fail to accept a few things. One is that 1%
I was going to ask you this
tax.
question. What is it that, if can be done, will get the Congress on board on the GST legislation?
As of
because
now,
you will appreciate the fact, and you understand economy and you've understood economic decisions, but you will appreciate the fact that there is political grandstanding on both sides.
No, there is no political grandstanding.
So what are the things that will get you on board?
First, there is no justification to have this 1% cascading tax when all the states are being compensated for the revenue losses.
Okay.
Number one, for a period of 5 years.
I understand.
Which we had demanded, and that additional levy, we cannot accept that. Second, because we understand that it is a destination-based tax. Second thing is about the dispute resolution. Third is about the cap. The way it has been tailored so far, unless and until some drastic changes are made, it will make India's GST one of the highest in the world. We are talking of or looking at something like 24-25%. So is it legitimate on our part to ensure that the burden on the consumer and producer is brought down to demand from the government to put a cap? Whether they put it at 18%, 20%, but they should make it clear. It cannot be vague. And another very fundamental issue is, how do you keep petroleum products out?
And alcohol as well.
And alcohol and electricity. Where's the justification? Petroleum is diesel and petrol are the biggest multiplier when it comes to transaction costs because of transportation. Now, when that is a fact, how do we address this issue?
Right.
You cannot have a situation where you have in Delhi diesel is at 60 rupees, in Chennai at 70 rupees, or Ahmedabad at 75 rupees. How can you accept this? And how can the government justify?
I agree with you there, but the reason why, and this is again a view that's coming in from the Treasury benches, and they say that the reason why we have done that is to get the states on board. So a lot of people believe it is okay to go with a half-baked GST. At least let's make a beginning. Doesn't that find favor with you?
Do you realize that as of now, the way it is structured, when you look at the central and the state GST, it will be anywhere between 23 and 25%, plus this 1% transaction tax, additional levy. Plus you have kept petroleum and alcohol out. Why? Well, how do the states benefit or lose? You are creating a room for additional burden on the industry and also on the consumers. It's not fair. And states must be told when the states are not losing any revenue, and same goes for revenue. There are studies for the alcohol that 40% of the excise is evaded when it comes to alcohol. Now, if you bring it within the net of the GST, the states stand to benefit actually.
Okay, so let's talk step by step, and I appreciate the points that you've raised because these are the points that Indian industry is also raising. But let's go step by step, and there are signs within Finance Ministry, and which is why we are tempted to believe that they could perhaps be budging on their own stand. They may perhaps accommodate a few of your demands.
They are not obliging us. That would be the correct thing to do.
No, they're not obliging you, but 1% additional levy is likely to go. If that were to happen, will the Congress be on board?
It cannot be piecemeal. Let the government come back to us. There has
but
to
you
be a
raised an objection
constructive
on 1%
engagement.
additional levy. If that
Yes,
were to go...
Also the dispute resolution mechanism.
The reason why I'm asking that question, sir, is that the government is willing to walk a few steps here. Will you be also willing to walk a few steps, reach a compromise, and get the GST started?
Well, if that was not the case, we would not have made these concrete suggestions or recommendations in the select committee, which we did.
So the 1% additional levy is a big bone of contention. The other big bone of contention, like you rightly suggested, was the revenue neutral rate.
Revenue neutral rate.
What is the rate with which you're comfortable with?
It must not be above 20% in any case.
Not above 20% in any case?
No, but then you cannot keep multiple windows open, which I have referred to. So there has to be a time-bound commitment. You are going for a constitutional amendment
bill,
which
yeah.
will have far-reaching implications. For the first time after independence, you are reforming the tax structures. And when you are making such sweeping changes, you have to ensure that you are progressive in your approach and also correct. Now, you cannot keep on having amendments periodically. This is not going to happen for many years more. So, when will the GST on petroleum also kick in, on alcohol also kick in, must be factored in now. It
so you
cannot
don't want that to be an open-ended statement.
No,
you need
no.
the timelines to be specified as well.
It will be very difficult for us to accept that it is a progressive move forward when you are keeping the biggest multiplier in transaction cost, that's the petroleum and diesel, out.
You know, sir, there are some reports that seem to suggest that the panel, the Chief Economic Advisor-led panel, Arvind Subramanian, who's going to be submitting this report, are likely to represent, are likely to perhaps recommend a differentiated GST rate for various products. Is that going to be counterproductive, and is that something that you're going to oppose?
It's not a question of blindly opposing or supporting. We have to see these proposals in black and white and make a very honest and open assessment about its positives and negatives.
You have seen Parliament function for decades now, and which is why I think it's only apt for me to ask you a very candid question. As things are, and as the signs that are coming from North Bloc about some conciliation being reached, some compromises being made, what is the possibility of the Constitutional Amendment Bill of the GST going through in the winter session of Parliament? Will you say likely, or will you say highly unlikely?
Well, I think all possibilities are there. It will be very difficult for me to make a definitive statement because the government has yet to come back to us.
So when you say all possibilities are there, what are the possibilities that make it likely, and what are the possibilities that make it unlikely?
Government has to respond to our demands. And if we are satisfied with the government's response, surely we would like to see the GST to go through.
Are you sensing a more conciliatory tone from the government after the Bihar debacle, at least on this reform that they really want to push?
No. Why only this reform?
Because that is really top of mind. Everybody's been talking about it.
Why? Means suddenly they have become desperate. Have they explained their own past conduct when the opposition to it was led by none other than the then Gujarat Chief Minister Narendra Modi, who is now the Prime Minister? Let them not make it appear that, oh, they see the good of the country and the good of the economy, whereas the opposition does not. Opposition is not making political points. We are not act for grandstanding. We are being very correct in what we are doing, and that's what I'm also making it clear. At the same time, when you talk of the attitude, where is the conciliatory attitude? You have a Prime Minister who has a confrontationist mindset, who is arrogant, who berates and humiliates opposition day in and day out. He travels abroad, is perpetually globe-trotting, and wherever he finds an audience, he says that Pahli baar, for the first time India is being recognized, first time India is being respected, nothing has happened in India before me. He belittles the achievements of this great country and its great people. He ends up insulting all his predecessors, whether from the Congress or also from his own party, Atal Bihari Vajpayee. That's what he does. And we have been telling the Prime Minister, stop doing that. There are issues at home. He has never commented. He talks of tolerance when he's in London. And he is on a Maun Vrat when he's in India. He has carried too far the mindset that he had as the campaigner when he was the Prime Ministerial candidate.
This isn't a political
campaign. He should have changed the role. Means once he became the Prime Minister, then he should have actually come out of that mindset. But he is not. It is up to him. We can't tell him what to do.
A fair point.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.